My wife cheated with her boss, stole $350, $0 from our joint account, and now she's suing me for half of our property, feeling betrayed and devastated beyond words. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, I thought I knew everything about my wife, Lisa. She was the kind of woman who always had a comeback, a sassy remark, and a way of making everyone think she was perfect. We'd been married for 7 years, and I genuinely believed we had a solid, if not perfect, life together. We had a nice house, decent jobs, and a bank account that was supposed to be for our future, things like buying a house, maybe starting a family someday. But all that changed in the span of a few weeks, and I'm still trying to process how it all fell apart so fast. It started with little things. Lisa had been acting a bit distant, more irritable than usual. She'd come home late from work, sometimes claiming she had to stay late for important meetings. She'd always been a bit of a bitch about her boss, Mark, but I just figured she was venting. She'd complain about how he was a total pain in the ass, how he was always hovering around her, giving her extra work and making her life difficult. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, every relationship has its ups and downs, right? But then the money started to get weird. I noticed some discrepancies in our joint account. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe I was just stressed or distracted. But then I saw a transfer of $50, $0 to an unknown account. I remember staring at the screen, feeling my stomach drop. How the hell did we just lose 50 grand? I called Lisa, and she brushed it off, saying she was handling some business stuff for her boss, Mark. She said it was just a loan or some kind of bonus she was supposed to get back. I wanted to believe her, but the way she was acting, nervous, defensive, made me suspicious. That suspicion grew stronger when I found her phone one night. I was looking for my keys and accidentally knocked it off the table. The screen lit up with a message from some guy named Jason. The message was explicit, talking about meeting up, sex, and even plans for the weekend. My heart almost stopped. I read it over and over, trying to make sense of it. That was the moment I realized Lisa wasn't just working late or having a rough patch. She was cheating on me with some guy she met through her boss. And that wasn't even the worst part. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I pulled up her bank statements, and what I saw was staggering. Over the past couple of months, she transferred close to $350, $0 from our joint account to some offshore accounts. The money was gone just like that. I couldn't believe it. How could she do this? How could she steal that much from us? I felt betrayed, like I'd been hit in the gut. And I knew without a doubt that she was cheating on me with her boss, Mark, and probably more guys. She always lied about her business trips, but now it all made sense. She'd been sneaking around, lying, manipulating, while I was sitting at home thinking we were building a future. That night, I confronted her. I sat her down in the living room, my hands trembling as I played the messages and showed her the bank statements. Her face turned pale, and for a moment she looked genuinely surprised, like she hadn't expected me to find out. Then she started to lie, of course. Said she was just talking to Mark, that it was nothing serious, that I was overreacting. She told me her affair was just a fling, a mistake she'd made while she was stressed out. She insisted she loved me, that I was the only one she cared about. But I could see through her lies. I saw the guilt in her eyes, the way her voice cracked when she tried to deny everything. She kept saying I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that I was crazy for suspecting her. I felt a boiling rage mixed with heartbreak. How could she do this? How could she betray me like that after all these years? I was devastated, but I also felt furious, furious at her lies, at her betrayal. I couldn't believe I was married to someone capable of stealing that much money and cheating on me with her boss. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all the signs? How did I not see this coming? It was like a punch to the gut every time I thought about the life I thought we had, crumbling right in front of me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything, trying to understand how my wife, the woman I loved and trusted, could turn out to be this manipulative, selfish person. I knew then that things had to change. I couldn't just sweep this under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. But what I didn't know yet was just how deep her lies went and how much more pain I was about to discover. The worst part was realizing I was completely. I had built my entire life around her, and now I was left with nothing but questions and a shattered sense of trust. I thought I knew her, but I was wrong. Dead wrong. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her pretending to be innocent, her trying to lie her way out of it. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how. I could have been so blind. She always had a quick comeback, a bitchy remark, but I thought she was just being Lisa, sharp, sassy, sometimes bitchy. But I never suspected she was capable of this level of betrayal. I started digging into her phone and her emails. I needed to know if she'd been lying about her whereabouts, about her business trips. Turns out, she'd been meeting Mark in secret, often late at night, and sometimes even during the day when I thought she was at work. I found receipts for fancy dinners, hotel stays, and even a couple of explicit photos she'd sent him. That was the moment I realized how deep her affair ran. It wasn't just a fling. It was something she'd been building for months. It made me sick to my stomach. One night I decided to confront her again, but this time I wanted to catch her in the act. I set up a little hidden camera in the living room, just to see if she'd come home late again. I was so angry I didn't care about privacy anymore. Sure enough, a few nights later, she came home around midnight, smelling like perfume and alcohol. I watched her through the camera as she entered the house, trying to act normal. I was ready to explode. I called her out immediately, showing her the footage. She froze, her face twisting into a mixture of guilt and fury. "What the hell is this, Lisa?" I demanded, voice trembling. "Who is Jason? Who is Mark? How long has this been going on? How much money have you stolen from us?" She tried to deny everything at first, claiming the money was for some investment, that she was going to pay it back, that she was just stressed out and made a mistake. She said she loved me, that she was only doing this because she was overwhelmed with work and life. She painted herself as a victim, a woman pushed to her limits. I couldn't believe her lies. She was so good at being manipulative, twisting everything around to make me doubt myself, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I was furious, heartbroken, and feeling a cold fury I'd never experienced before. I told her I wanted her out of the house, that I was done playing her game. I told her she was a cheating, thieving bitch who had destroyed everything we built. She looked at me with those fake, innocent eyes, trying to act like she was the victim. I saw through her. I knew she was lying again and again because she had no remorse. Her attitude was as bitchy as ever, dismissive, like she didn't give a damn about the pain she caused. That night I sat alone in the dark, feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train. All the trust, all the love I'd given her was gone. I kept thinking about the money, how she stole so much from us, how she'd lied about everything. I felt like a fool for trusting her, for believing she was the woman I married. The betrayal cut so deep I wondered if I'd ever recover from it. I started to realize that this wasn't just about the money or the affair. It was about her complete lack of respect for me and everything we had. She had lied, cheated, and stolen, and she was still trying to act like she was the victim. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what yet. Part of me wanted to just walk away, to forget about her and start over. But another part of me was so angry I wanted revenge. I wanted her to feel what I felt, humiliated, betrayed, and absolutely destroyed. I didn't want her to get away with this. I wanted her to pay somehow. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it yet, but I knew I couldn't just let her walk all over me and get away with stealing that much money, with screwing around with her boss, with lying to my face every day. The next step was obvious: legal action. I started talking to a lawyer, figuring out what my options were. I knew she'd try to sue me for half the property, which was fair enough considering she'd stolen so much, but I also wanted justice. I wanted her to face the consequences of what she'd done. I was so filled with anger, hurt, and a sense of betrayal that I couldn't see straight. The thought of her trying to take half of everything we had made me sick. It was like she was trying to take my life away from me, all because she couldn't keep her legs closed and her hands out of the cookie jar. Meanwhile, I was also watching her, waiting for her next move. She was still acting bitchy, throwing around insults, trying to act like she was the victim. But I saw through it. Deep down, I knew she was scared. She knew she'd crossed a line she couldn't come back from, and I was determined not to let her get away with it, not without consequences. I was planning my next move, how to get the money back, how to protect myself legally, and how to finally put an end to this nightmare. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her ruin me, not without a fight. The days that followed were some of the most chaotic of my life. I was glued to my phone, email, and lawyer's office, trying to piece everything together. Meanwhile, Lisa kept throwing her weight around, acting like she was the victim, her usual bitchy attitude, but now with a layer of desperation I hadn't seen before. She'd call me, scream, accuse me of cheating on her, or say I was trying to ruin her life. It was exhausting. Honestly, I felt like I was losing my mind trying to keep up with all her lies. One night, she stormed into the house, furious, demanding all the money back, claiming I was ruining her reputation. She yelled that she was the one who's been betrayed, and that I was just some jealous husband trying to control her. She called me a paranoid, insecure loser and said she'd never been happier with Mark, like that made everything okay. I just stared at her, trying to hold it together. Inside, I was boiling with anger. How could she be so cold, so dismissive of everything she'd done? How could she lie so blatantly, so shamelessly? In the middle of her tirade, she dropped a bombshell. She was planning to sue me for half of everything we owned. I couldn't believe my ears. After all she'd done, she still thought she deserved half, even after stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars. That was her way of trying to save face, I guess. She was trying to manipulate the situation, make me feel guilty, or maybe just to scare me into giving her what she wanted. She looked at me with that bitchy smirk like she was already winning, but I knew better. I had already hired a lawyer and I was ready for the fight. The lawyer explained the legal process. She'd try to claim half of the house, the savings, everything. But I had proof of her theft, her affair, and her lies. I had the bank statements, the messages, the recordings. I was prepared to fight her in court. It was clear she was trying to spin this as me being controlling or paranoid, but I had the evidence. I knew I was going to need it all. The thought of her walking away with half of everything, after stealing so much and betraying me so badly, made my blood boil. I wasn't going down without a fight. The night she announced her plan to sue, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I knew I had proof, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Dread because I knew this was only the beginning of a long, ugly legal battle. I could see her scheming, trying to come up with ways to twist the story, to make herself look like the victim. She was good at that, lying, manipulating, spinning everything to her advantage. I had to stay one step ahead. I started gathering every piece of evidence I could find: bank records, text messages, emails, even some of her phone call logs. I wanted to make sure she couldn't wiggle out of this. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her bitchy attitude, throwing insults, calling me names, trying to turn friends and family against me. She claimed I was abusive, that I'd been controlling her, that I'd never truly loved her. I just shook my head and kept my distance. I knew her game. She was trying to make herself the victim even after all she'd done. I also started to realize how much she'd lied about her life, her supposed career, her supposed stress. Everything was a lie. She'd been living a double life and I was the last to know. In the middle of all this chaos, I also discovered something shocking. She'd been secretly withdrawing money from our joint account for months, sometimes in small amounts, sometimes in huge sums. I found out she'd been funneling money to her sister, to some shady online investments, and even to herself under fake names. Amount she stole, 350 was staggering. That's more than most people make in a lifetime, and she'd done it all behind my back, lying and scheming. It was like discovering my wife was a con artist, a thief, and a cheat all rolled into one. I started to feel the full weight of her betrayal. This wasn't just an affair or a petty theft. It was a calculated, cold scheme to ruin us financially and emotionally. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. How could she do this to us? How could she be so bitchy and manipulative while secretly destroying everything? I kept asking myself if I should even try to save the marriage or just cut my losses and walk away. But deep down, I knew I needed to fight, not just for the money but for my dignity and sanity. I also began to think about revenge, how I could make her pay for everything she'd done. I didn't want her to walk away scot-free, pretending she was the innocent victim. I wanted her to feel what I felt, humiliated, betrayed, and powerless. I knew it was going to be a long road ahead, but I was determined not to let her win. I started planning carefully, making sure every piece of evidence was in order, every legal step mapped out. I wanted her to regret ever crossing me, to understand that her actions had consequences. And so I steeled myself for what was to come. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it. Not after everything. I was hurt, angry, and betrayed, more than I'd ever been in my life. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I was finally seeing her for what she truly was, a manipulative, selfish bitch who thought she could walk all over me. Well, I was done being the victim. It was time to fight back. The legal battle started almost immediately after Lisa filed her lawsuit, claiming she was entitled to half of everything: our house, savings, investments, despite the fact that I had mountains of proof showing her theft and infidelity. I knew her game. She was trying to leverage her accusations of control and abuse to gain sympathy from the court, but I had nothing to hide. Every document, every message, every bank withdrawal was carefully organized and ready to be presented. The courtroom was a nightmare. Lisa sat there with her usual bitchy smirk, trying to look innocent while her lawyer played the victim card, accusing me of being controlling and manipulative. She kept insisting she was just trying to protect her rights, that I'd been abusive, and that her affair with Mark was just a moment of weakness. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I had the receipts, screenshots of her bank transfers, messages from Jason and Mark, hotel receipts, the explicit photos she'd sent her boss. I knew she was lying, and I was determined to make sure everyone else knew it too. During the proceedings, Lisa's lawyer tried to spin the story, claiming I'd been emotionally abusive and that I'd driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. It was laughable. I sat there, seething, knowing I had the evidence to blow her lies out of the water. I made a detailed timeline showing her secret meetings, the money she stole, her lies about her business trips. I even brought in witnesses, people who saw her sneaking around late at night or heard her talking on the phone with Mark in hushed tones. It was humiliating having to relive all of this in court, but I knew I had to. Lisa's reaction was a mixture of bitchy smirks and sneers, especially when she realized I was getting the upper hand. She kept trying to manipulate the judge, acting like she was the wronged wife, the victim of my controlling ways. But I saw through her act. I knew her game. She was just trying to save face, to make herself look innocent while she was the one who had betrayed everything we built. Meanwhile, the financial evidence was damning. I presented the bank statements showing her transfers of $350, $0, the offshore account she'd opened, the withdrawals she'd made. I had the emails and messages from Jason and Mark, revealing their affair and her explicit conversations with them. I had her own phone logs showing her secret calls and texts during business hours. It was clear she'd been lying for months, cheating on me with her boss, stealing from us, and trying to cover her tracks. The judge listened carefully, taking notes, asking questions. When it was my turn to speak, I laid out everything: how she'd lied, cheated, and stolen. I told them how I'd trusted her, how I'd loved her, and how she'd repaid that trust with betrayal. I explained that I wanted justice, not just for the money but for the years of lies and manipulation. I emphasized that her actions had shattered our marriage and my trust, and that I was fighting to protect what was left of my dignity. Lisa's side tried to paint her as a victim, saying she was overwhelmed, stressed, and pushed to her limit. But I knew the truth. I knew she was just a bitchy, manipulative woman who thought she could get away with everything. I saw her sneer and I knew she was scared, scared that her lies were finally coming apart. The courtroom was tense, and I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on us. I knew this was only the beginning of a long legal fight, but I also knew I had the truth on my side. The evidence was solid, and I was determined to see justice done. I was tired of being the victim of her schemes, tired of feeling betrayed and humiliated. Now I was ready to stand my ground. After the court session, I felt exhausted but somehow lighter. I knew Lisa's game wasn't over, but I also knew I had exposed her for who she truly was. Her bitchy attitude, her lies, her manipulations, they all crumbled a little more that day. I was finally beginning to see a way out of this mess. I promised myself I wouldn't let her destroy me. I'd fight for what was rightfully mine, for what we'd built together, and for my own sanity. I realized I wasn't just fighting for money or property. I was fighting to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my peace of mind. The months that followed were a relentless barrage of legal hearings, depositions, and negotiations. Lisa was still trying to play the victim, throwing her bitchy attitude around like it was some kind of armor. She'd show up at court looking annoyed, rolling her eyes, and making snarky comments to her lawyer, who was clearly more interested in protecting her than in getting to the truth. But I was no longer swayed by her act. I had the evidence, the facts, and the truth on my side, and I was determined to see it through. Throughout this process, I felt ill of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, and a strange sense of relief. I'd been by her betrayal, but now I was finally confronting it head-on. I started to realize how much she'd lied, not just about her affair and stealing money, but about who she really was. She'd always been bitchy, yes, but underneath that, she was a manipulative, selfish woman who thought she could get away with anything. One of the hardest parts was negotiating the property settlement. She still insisted she deserved half of everything, even after everything she'd done. Our house, which I'd worked hard for, was suddenly on the table. She claimed she needed it for stability, even though she had stolen so much money from us. I knew she was trying to use her bitchy, entitled attitude to sway the judge, but I wasn't having it. I had the evidence of her theft and her affair, and I made sure that was brought up during the negotiations. Things got heated when Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that she was entitled to a significant share of the assets because she had contributed to the marriage. I shot back with the facts, how she'd drained our savings, how she'd lied about her business trips, and how she'd been unfaithful. I argued that her actions had destroyed the foundation of our marriage, and that she shouldn't get a free ride just because she was bitchy and manipulative. The judge listened carefully, and I could tell he was leaning in my favor after I laid out the evidence. Meanwhile, Lisa was still trying to keep up her bitchy facade, but I saw her cracks. She was losing her composure, her usual snarky attitude replaced by a desperate, almost pathetic glare. I knew she was scared she was about to lose everything she'd stolen, her reputation, her victim status. I had made sure her lies were exposed, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I was starting to see a path toward justice, even if it meant a long, ugly fight. The final hearing was the culmination of everything. I sat there, feeling exhausted but resolved. Lisa, sitting across from me, was fidgeting and trying to act like she was the innocent victim. Her lawyer was trying to spin a story about how she was misunderstood and wronged, but I didn't buy it. I had the proof: bank statements, message logs, witness testimonies that painted a very different picture. I'd fought tooth and nail to protect what was left of my dignity and my assets. When the judge finally delivered his ruling, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. Lisa was ordered to pay back the stolen money, and she lost her claim to the house and most of the assets. Her attempt to claim half of everything had been, and I was awarded full custody of the few assets I'd kept. She looked furious, her bitchy smirk replaced by a scowl of pure hatred. But I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life again. Walking out of that courtroom, I realized how much I'd grown through this nightmare. I'd been betrayed, humiliated, and manipulated, but I'd also fought back. I'd exposed her lies, protected my assets, and reclaimed some sense of peace. I knew she'd never admit to her actions, but I didn't care anymore. What mattered was that I had finally taken a stand. I'd learned that trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to rebuild, sometimes impossible. But I also learned that sometimes the only way to move forward is to fight for yourself, no matter how bitchy or manipulative the person opposing you might be. Now, I'm slowly rebuilding my life. I've moved out of the house, started therapy, and focused on my own recovery. The pain still lingers, but I'm learning to let go of the anger and betrayal. I've realized that revenge, in the end, isn't about hurting her back. It's about healing myself and making sure I don't get played like that again. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Trust is fragile, and some people will do anything to destroy it. But if you stand your ground, gather the evidence, and fight for what's right, you can survive even the most gut-wrenching betrayals. Just don't forget to protect yourself, because not everyone has your best interests at heart, especially the bitchy ones who think they're above the law. In the aftermath of everything, I've come to realize how much this whole ordeal has changed me. The betrayal, the lies, the theft, everything hit me hard, but it also forced me to see things clearly for once. I used to think love and trust were everything, but now I know that sometimes people reveal their true colors only when it's too late. Lisa's bitchy attitude, her manipulations, her lies, they all showed me what she truly was, a selfish, entitled woman who thought she could get away with anything. The court case was brutal, but it was also a kind of liberation. I fought hard for my rights, for my dignity, and for what I knew was right. I won, not just legally, but emotionally. I learned that standing up for yourself, even when it's messy and painful, is the only way to truly move forward. I also learned that some betrayals cut so deep that healing takes time, and that's okay. It's okay to grieve the loss of what you thought was a life built on trust and love. Now I spend my days rebuilding. I focus on my work, on my mental health, and on rediscovering myself outside of that toxic relationship. I've cut ties with Lisa completely. No contact, no regrets. I've poured my energy into friends, hobbies, and a future that I can actually control. I don't dwell on the past anymore, but I do remember it, so I can learn from it. I want anyone reading this to understand that even in the worst moments, there's a way out. You can fight, you can expose the lies, and you can reclaim your life. I also want to say this. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for standing up for yourself. Lisa tried to paint herself as the victim, but I know the truth. She's the one who betrayed everything we had, who stole from us, and who lied her way through it all. I refuse to carry that guilt anymore. Her bitchy attitude and manipulations don't define me. What defines me now is my resilience, my strength, and my refusal to be a victim of her schemes. If there's any lesson I can leave you with, it's this. Trust is precious, but it's fragile. Be careful who you trust and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. Some people are just looking out for themselves. Lisa was one of those people. But I've learned that if you hold your ground, gather your evidence, and stay true to yourself, you can survive even the deepest betrayals. And in the end, that's what matters most, finding the strength to move on and rebuild a life worth living free from bitchy, manipulative people who think they can get away with anything.